Alright, what's going on, guys? Okay, so what's your stance? Part 3. Talking some more about boxing stances. Basically, kind of picking up where we left off on the last video. Today I want to talk a little bit more about strategy. The stance you use dictates, it'll dictate your strengths and weaknesses, right? Nothing's going to be perfect. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about why you would use a certain stance as opposed to another. Okay, so there's a channel on YouTube that's been around forever. You know, I started watching it when I first started training, you know, along with precision striking. Of course, you know, that's like one of the biggest boxing channels, I think. A lot of great videos on there. You know, I started watching that channel when I first started training. And then the other one is Fight Camp, okay? It's run by a guy named Safe Carmen, okay? Now, this guy really knows what he's talking about. I mean, he's been training for, you know, almost 60 years. Pretty much every martial art he has some experience in. And he's got tons of videos on techniques and how to use certain stances. But what I think really shines from this channel is he's more of a philosopher, okay? So he talks about the philosophy side of martial arts, which I think is really interesting and kind of really sets him apart, okay? So he's no nonsense, but I think that just comes from his vast experience, and he knows what he's talking about. I mean, when you're talking about martial arts and self-defense, and you know, boxing's a part of that, but when you talk about like the self-defense side of things, you know, it's not a pretty world. It's not fun in that aspect, okay? You got to think about, like, you know, violence in general. I don't like it at all. I don't like violence. I don't like violent things. I try to avoid violent media, but you know, I love boxing, which is, you know, it's hard for some people to understand, but boxing is a sport to me. It's competition. To me, it's like, you know, all the other sports are basically trying to figure out like who could win in a fight, and I feel like boxing is just, you know, we already got something that does that. So to me, a lot of the other sports are kind of boring, and I just don't see the point. But boxing, MMA, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, like all of them, I love them. I just, because it's finding out, like, under these rule set, if it was a fight, you know, under this rule set, who would win, and that kind of gives you an idea of, like, if there were no rules, right, who would win. You know, it's not exactly perfect, but I have no interest in seeing like a no rules, flat out, like anything goes. You know, it's too violent. Like, it gets to a point where it's just too much, right? Okay, at least for me. Okay, so that's that. All right, so I'll link the channel Fight Camp in the description. So check out some of these videos. I think you'll learn a lot from the guy, so just give him a chance, okay? Okay, so you want to have a goal-oriented approach to boxing or martial arts, okay? And I think this might be a quote from that Safe Carmen guy. I can't remember. I've heard this somewhere, that like wrestling is a goal-oriented, right? They show you a technique, and they don't care if you do it perfectly. The idea is that you get the job done, okay? So I think what happens in boxing is people get so fixated on doing things perfectly or exactly how their trainer taught them to do it, that they lose sight of the goal, or they get so fixated on doing things so technically perfect that they just never reach a decent level, or they hit a plateau at some kind of intermediate level and never go beyond, okay? So goal-oriented, you want to be goal-oriented. So that goes right along with the stance thing, because if I want to stay on the outside, I'm gonna stand more bladed, right? The more bladed I get, the harder it is to keep this arm up, my lead arm up like this. It hurts my shoulder. It's uncomfortable. That's why the arm comes down here, right? So if I want to stay on the outside, I'm gonna stand more like this, right? But if that's all I can do, I'm easy to figure out, right? People are gonna know that, like, I can only fight from this position, that there's ways to take advantage of that if that's all I can do, right? So you want to be able to do everything, right? You want to be able to box on the outside, you want to be able to fight on the inside, push forward. So looking at this from one extreme to the other, you want to be able to fight bladed. You want to be able to fight from a bladed stance, you know, and you want to be able to fight from a square stance, right? And then there's the in-between, which is like what I like. Most of the time, I'm somewhere in between, right? I'm in the middle here. So I can fight off the back foot just by leaning my weight back, and now I look more bladed. If I want to get more bladed than that, I can. Which situationally, I might do that. An example would be like in the early rounds. I don't want to just come out in round 1, 2, or 3 when the other guy's fresh. I don't know anything about him. I don't want to come out, giving him my center line and pushing forward. I might not do that. I might try to just get a read on him for a couple rounds, right? So I'm mostly just keeping him away, trying to set up a 2, and then moving away. So I'm probably moving back a lot in this stance. You can pressure forward with it, right? But for the most part, what really makes the stance, what the strength of the stance is that you can keep someone away and you got really good backwards movement, okay? Another thing I might do is watching a lot of Marvin Hagler, okay? He usually comes out southpaw for the first 4 or 5 rounds of the fight, maybe, right? And I think he does that because if the guy's orthodox, he's less likely to rush in. He's going to be more hesitant facing a southpaw because most orthodox people are not used to fighting a southpaw, right? So it allows Marvin to get a read on the guy. He can start wearing the guy down with body shots, get a read on him, and then once the other guy has slowed down a bit, then he switches to orthodox to really lay into him, okay? So it's goal oriented. You might stand a certain way depending on what you're trying to do. And this is going to change from situation to situation. This is going to change from opponent to opponent, all right? Okay. So then the other option is a really squared up stance, right? So like peekaboo style is really squared up, all right? Like Tyson, Floyd Patterson, they might get semi-squared as they're moving in, but the goal is to get squared up so you can throw both hands with power and wear the guy down, all right? But a really squared up stance, you have good side-to-side movement, right? You're going to use this to cut off the ring. You want to get the guy in a corner. You want to get in close. It's good for pushing forward. It's a pressure fighter stance, right? You got good head movement. You got the full range of head movement all around, right? Your center line is exposed. Yes, but you got to be aware of that weakness. Same thing in the Philly shell. You got to be aware of the weaknesses in the Philly shell, okay? You got good balance going, shooting forward for jabs, good backward balance, but I don't got good side-to-side balance, right? Someone could push me over. If this guy's standing really bladed in a Philly shell, someone can hit you here, and if they hit you in the stomach here, you're off balance there, right? Or this back leg here, right? Outside of boxing, it's not really a good idea to have this much, to give this much of a blind side to a person because you don't know what they're gonna do, all right? So this squared up stance. One of my favorite fighters, Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., all right? It's one of my favorite fighters. He fights pretty squared up. But one of the reasons he's one of my favorites is because he can get, a little more semi-bladed and box if he wants to. But for the most part, he's a pretty squared up pressure fighter. right? He's got really good, really underrated defense with these little parries and head movement, but he's got good power in both hands, and there's a reason why he stands like that, okay? So another thing, these stances might change depending on who you're fighting, right? That's another thing that plays into this. Like, if you're gonna stand differently if someone's really tall compared to if you're fighting someone shorter than you, okay? If I'm fighting someone my size or shorter than me, I might be more likely to Philly shell, stand bladed, and keep them on the outside a little bit longer, okay? Now, if they're really tall or a lot heavier than me, right? When you're sparring, sometimes, you should really limit how much heavier you're sparring somebody. I'd say 20 pounds max, but it's not always how it goes, right? Sometimes you feel pressured to say yes, but an eye-opening thing for me was when I was in the gym, and almost every other guy in the gym was a pro, okay? And I didn't know this until like after a year of training there that, almost every other person that trains there is a pro fighter, okay? I just thought they were regular guys like me. But I saw one of these pro guys, and a big guy asked him to spar, and he was hesitant, and he asked the guy how much he weighed, blah, blah, blah. He ended up sparring him, but to me that was just like, oh, like, this guy's a pro fighter who is concerned about sparring this guy because he's, 40 pounds heavier than him. That was an eye-awakener. Like, it takes guts to get in the ring, but it takes more guts to say, no, you're too big, okay? So think about that. Keep your safety in mind, okay? Okay, so going along about fighting a bigger opponent, all right? Nate Campbell, 3-time lightweight world champion.
The Galaxy Warrior, Nate Campbell,
showed me this, okay? If you're fighting a really big guy, sometimes the easiest thing to do is you just square up like this, and you just walk him down, right? You just push forward and make him throw, and you got your guard, you got your high guard up like this. You can use these little parries, boom, boom, counter off that, but you're just trying to get in close, and you're just gonna, until the ref breaks you up, and then you start all over again, okay? So check out his fight with Ali Funenka, I think it was. It was like a 6 foot something, and Nate's only like 5'7", and the whole fight, he just walked him down like this. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Like, I didn't understand what he was trying to tell me until like a few years later. Like, I thought it had to be like, oh, footwork and, Pacquiao and Ali and just all this like really crazy footwork. Sometimes it's just as simple as that, right? You look at how Mayweather fought McGregor. He didn't fight him how he fights a lot of people, most people, right? For the most part, he just put up this high guard and walked him down, tired him out, made him work, right? So another guy who has a really good high guard is that high guard shell is Winky Wright, okay? So another reason I like this semi-square stance, you honestly watch most fighters and they're fighting from a semi-squared stance, okay? Most people, honestly, most pros seem to be using a semi-square stance, and depending on how the camera angles and where you're looking at it, they might look really bladed. But if I'm standing like this, my opponent's standing like this, from here that might look pretty bladed, but from my point of view, I'm basically standing almost completely squared up with him. Okay, so a lot of it is how you're looking at it from the outside, but if you look at it from the fighter's point of view, when we're in the pocket here, right, we're almost completely squared up. Our hips are almost completely squared up with each other, okay? That was from Joe Frazier. In his book, he says you know, it's a good, a lot of this stuff is good in theory, right? To be completely sideways with a person in theory, but in reality, how are you supposed to fight somebody if you're standing sideways to them? All right, so another reason I really like the semi-square stance, you know, I can move, I can go on the front foot. I lean forward on the front foot, and I appear way more squared up, but I also appear closer. I look closer to my opponent. I can pull back, set traps like that, right? I can lean back, and I appear farther away. I appear more bladed, right? But it's my lead foot determines my distance. I can lean back like this, I appear more bladed, but my lead foot is getting closer and closer. Boom, boom, boom. Right? So you set traps, distance deception. Wilson Caden. Watch Wilson Caden, okay? I'll link him too. It's another channel that, you know, he doesn't get any credit, but like, he was the first person I've seen talk about this distance deception and really explain fighting off the front foot and back foot, okay? He was the first person I've seen explain that. And that, well, you know, I'm pretty sure he's influenced a lot of people with his videos. All right, we're back. Storage is full on my phone. Okay, so Wilson Caden, you know, he has all these great videos, but he doesn't get enough credit, so check out his channel, okay? All right, so back to this semi-square stance, right? I got the benefit of moving from front foot to back foot. And what else, the other thing I really like about the stance is that, you know, most of us who train boxing, you know, 80-90% of us are just doing it for self-defense, right? Okay? So, if you're doing it for self-defense, like, you want to listen to your trainer, but you also have to take a step back and think about how you would apply this in real life, okay? From this semi-square stance, you know, I got good movement in all directions. I got good head movement, right? So head movement in a self-defense situation, right? You can get kneed or you can get kicked in the face, right? Okay. But they're not gonna know that you can do this, right? They're not gonna know how well you can move your head and counter. So you can get away with it for maybe one or two kind of slips or rolls, all right? Before he's gonna pick up on it. But from that, you know, from this stance, I can dip and go in for a takedown, right? I can 1-2 and go in for an ankle pick, right? Or a single leg, right? So that kind of thing would be hard to do from a bladed stance. And, you know, he could kick out your leg. He could take you down pretty easy. He can hit you in the back of the head because you're giving him too much of a blind side, right? You want to be more squared up in a self-defense situation, right? So from this semi-square stance, I also have good kicks and knees, all right? So you don't have to get too fancy, but if you can front kick, right? I got both legs available for front kicks. From this stance, I can knee from this stance, right? I got elbows, you know? Elbows are an in-close kind of thing, but if you get to the point where you're grappling, he's grabbing you, you're grabbing him, right? Boom. You got your elbows, okay? So a semi-square stance is the best stance for me because I like what I can do for it. I like what I can do with it in the ring, and a lot of it translates very well into self-defense as well, okay? So that's another reason why I really like it. Okay, so goal-oriented. You want to be goal-oriented, right? So there are different tactics, there's strategies you would use, and that will help determine which stance you're going to use, all right? So another thing to think about this, there's the stereotype that like the kind of bladed, slick, more Philly shell kind of guy. There's a stereotype that he's afraid to get hit, but the other side of it is that he's smart, okay? Which is not always true, okay? Sometimes this guy's not afraid to get hit. Sometimes he has a really good shin, and but he is smart, okay? And he's gonna use that to an advantage, okay? But the other side of the stereotype is that, like, the pressure fighter, the squared up guy, moving forward, the stereotype is that he's dumb, okay? But it's not always true. There's different strategies, there's different tactics, okay? Roman Gonzalez, you know, he's a smart fighter. He's very defensive. Chavez Sr., he's very defensive. He's smart too. He knows how to use his stance, right? So that's what you want to do. You want to learn these stances and learn how to mix and match them, and that's how you're going to come up with your own style, okay? You got to watch and learn from everybody, okay? Yeah, you listen to your trainers, you know, but you got to have judgment. You got to have good judgment. If they're telling you something that's not working for you, you know, you got to move on from that, okay? Don't get stuck and keep trying to do it if it's not working for you. What happens is all this stuff gets mixed up, and you got people telling you you need to stand like this, but they want you to fight like someone who stands like this, and it just doesn't work that way. They got you standing like this, and they're telling you to move your head like this and this, but you're all bladed, you get off balance, and look I'm just bringing my head closer and closer to you, and I'm not really getting enough space to actually avoid your punches, right? If you're standing like this, it's more comfortable to bring this arm down. Your head movement's gonna be more like this, dipping, okay? If you're standing like this, it's different strategies, okay? You have different strategies available to you. Like, there's a reason why you would stand like this. So that's something I wanted to talk about, right? Nobody knows everything, right? There's people that have been training for forever, and you're still learning things, okay? So you might have a really good trainer, but he's not gonna know everything, right? A lot of people I see, a lot of trainers and stuff, like, the most I agree with someone is like 99%. It's never 100%, okay? There's always gonna be one or two things that a trainer says that I disagree with, and that's okay, okay? To agree with someone 99% is a lot, especially on a subject like this, like boxing, all right? Boxing is very secretive. Everybody's got their styles and their secrets, right? And the reason is because it's dangerous, right? You know, you could get seriously hurt or worse in this sport, okay? So there's got to be a level of secrecy. You don't want to just be telling everybody everything, okay? So some of these, you know, some of these drills and stuff, you might want to do them at home. You might not want to share everything with everybody in your gym, okay? Because of that. Yeah, so not everybody knows everything, right? You're always going to be learning things. Your trainer might know a lot, but he might not know what's best for you, and that's okay, right? You might have to start studying on your own, right? You are responsible for your learning. You might eventually have to go to a different trainer if that's the case, right? You need to use your judgment. You are responsible for your health and your learning, right? So a big part of this is, do you have the discipline to tell yourself, I need to work on this, you know, I'm having trouble with the jab, and spend a week just working on the jab, right? Every day you come in, you do a drill, just working on your jab as your warm-up, okay? Then the next week, don't just stop. Say, okay, now I'm gonna work on the right hand, right? Then the week after that, you might work your slips, right? And you're constantly, every week, you're giving yourself something to work on. And then if you don't know what to work on, you just start all over again. Go back to your jab, go back to your footwork, all right? But you are responsible for your learning. You need to be the one that says, okay, I'm gonna start working on southpaw, right? At home, you know, people in the gym might tell you not to do that, but you need to develop your style. You need to be able to flow through these different kind of stances and strategies, and you need to develop an instinct for when to do it. And that kind of thing is, you have to do it on your own, right? That's why they say you can't teach someone like James Toney, right? Which I don't think is true. I think he learned, but he just took responsibility for his learning on his own, okay? And he studied fighters, and, you know, that's how you get better, right? Nobody knows everything. You're gonna have to be the one who goes home and puts on a fight in slow motion with the sound off, and watches and pauses to make sure, you know, and sees like the different positions and what's happening, and pause and ask yourself, what would I do in this situation? Hit play, see if you were right, okay? You can put on some music, it makes it a lot more enjoyable, but that's what the kind of thing that you're gonna have to do if you wanna get better, all right? You need to develop your instincts, your reflexes, and you're responsible for that, basically. You can't just expect someone, you know, just because it's the nearest gym to your house, you know, expect that just be the perfect place for you, okay? Okay, so you want to be a goal-oriented fighter, right? You want to have an idea of what you want to do in mind and understand how to execute it, right? If you want to pressure forward, you need to understand how to stand correctly to have the most success with that goal, all right? So for me, my goal was to be a 360-degree fighter. I wanted to be able to fight from any position. I wanted to be at least able to defend myself from any position, right? Someone gets over here, I'm stuck in this kind of southpaw position. I wanted to be able to at least defend myself, at least get to safety from that position, right? So, you know, you got to practice everything. You got to practice bladed stances, orthodox southpaw. The cool thing about a squared up stance is it doesn't feel as weird when you practice a squared up stance in southpaw, okay? It feels pretty balanced, to me at least. But you're gonna have to take responsibility on your own to practice this stuff and then mix it all together, study your favorite fighters, watch fighters that you don't think are that great. You'll learn from them too, okay? But you're responsible for mixing this stuff up and creating your own style, right? You know, like I said earlier, a big problem is it gets mixed up in the wrong way, where they tell you to stand, you know, stand like this, for example, but they want you to fight like someone who stands like this. You know, that's going to be a disaster, okay? So you got to have an understanding of these stances and how they're used, all right? So try it out, like the video, sub the channel. Peace.